Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, so aloha kako. The Zonta Club of Hilo welcomes everyone to learn how to have your voice heard at the state legislature. We're so lucky today to be able to share everybody's understanding of how they can have their voices heard, along with an expert from the public access room. For those of you who may not know, Zonta International is a club that was organization that was started over 100 years ago. Yes, 100 years ago. And our mission is to empower women and girls worldwide so that we can have a fair and just society. Uh, and why we're talking about law is that at one point in our development, everybody had the common law. And common law was based on just common values. So you didn't have to have it written down. Everybody understood how you had to behave, what you would do, what the consequences would be if you broke the law. But as the world changed, people were saying, no, that's not enough. You cannot have it just oral and understood. You have to put it in writing. And that's why it's codified. That's why when societies changed and grew and there was more mobility, understanding of how the laws had to be codified and written down. And now we live in a global world and you hear about it every day, you turn on the news. So when you see the world, you can see that internationally, we have the global world and we have organizations that are based on countries or nations that agree through treaties or other types of agreements, how they will behave or how they will share resources, for example, United Nations. Then the next level actually is the nation itself. And here in America is the United, not divided, but United States of America. We're based on a written document that's called the Constitution. And then we have 3 bodies that are for the balance of power, which involves the legislative section, which is they develop the laws, they put them and codify them. Then you have the executive branch, which executes on those laws, which are given to them by the legislature, as well as the funding. Then you have the judiciary branch, which decides whether or not people are doing what they're supposed to do. And all these laws really talk about individual rights as compared to the collective good of society. So there's always a balance. And we're seeing that play out today in our lives. So that's why the federal government is the body that would be the legislative body for the national level. The state level is the state level. That's why it's one of the most important, because in the 50 states, that law is what actually impacts us on a daily level, more than probably the federal law. And in those states, everybody can have a little different law as long as it doesn't violate the federal law. And then there's a smaller group of legislative powers, and that's called the county level. And so in Hawaii, we have 4 counties. Each one has a charter, which is like the Constitution. Then they have different kinds of laws written down. There are ordinances that tell people how they'll behave and how much money is allotted to different places. So we're very lucky now because we can have an understanding through this Zoom. We could be coming in from all over the world to understand how our voices can be heard at the state legislature. So we're very lucky tonight to have someone from the Legislative Reference Bureau Public Access Room, which is the coordinator to provide information to the public. And Virginia Beck is our coordinator. Virginia, wave to us, will you? Could you wave to us? Okay. She'll do the presentation today, and it's going to be a very dense presentation, how your voices will be heard. So we're going to be put on mute initially. If you have a burning question, you can actually unmute yourself and ask a question. You can put a chat in there and we'll try to monitor the chat. Or if you can wait to the end, we'll answer all your questions that you have. Because this is really an opportunity for us to learn about our state legislature, how our voices can be heard, and that we can have impact as advocates. We can make a difference not only for women, girls, but all society. So that's why we're here providing a foundation. And our hope is that we will have a more specific training later with our island-wide representatives and senators at the state level, and they will help us perhaps with the public access room to give specific pointers on how to write testimony, how to track bills, how to be an effective advocate, what to do, and more importantly, what not to do. So that has been promised by one of our legislators that she will help us to develop that before the legislative session starts. So again, we're very lucky. So Virginia, could you take it away and give us all the information that you can provide us to have our voices heard?
Sure. Thank you, Charlene. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I've got a PowerPoint that we'll use. There we go. I hope everyone can see it. Yep. All right. So thanks for inviting me. And this presentation does a few things. Some of it Charlene just covered, the overview of where the legislature stands. But we'll basically do an overview of the legislature, the bill to law process, and how you can add your voice at various stages along the way, and then some tools to help as you participate. And as she mentioned, feel free to ask questions if they're urgent, or go ahead and we'll have some time at the end. So we call this your voice because, as we know, government, that the power is vested in the people. And for the government to work well, it really needs to have people participating. So the legislature developed this office called the Public Access Room, is specifically to help people participate in the legislative process. So we are essentially your office here at the state capitol. And we do lots of different things here. We're nonpartisan. We don't take a position. We're not affiliated with any political party. We don't take a position on any kind of legislation. We're all about the process instead of about the policy. And we answer lots of questions about the process, all at no charge. When right now the Capitol building is closed to the public, unfortunately, because of the COVID crisis. But when it is open, if you're over on Oahu and coming to the Capitol, you can use our office as your base of operations. We have computers that you can use here. There's workspace. You can bring your laptop, recharge it, have us make copies for you of meeting materials, that kind of thing. And as I mentioned, answer questions about what's going on, what just happened, what's next. You would think that every single state in the country would have an office like the Public Access Room to help their citizens make sense of it all. But as it turns out, only Alaska and Hawaii are the two states that have full service offices at their state capitals. Some state capitals have very little in the way of resources for people trying to participate. So as was mentioned, this is a pretty dense presentation. We cover a lot of things. Just know that you can go to our website and you can find this PowerPoint there with all the notes. So don't feel like you have to take lots of notes as we go through things tonight. So our website is lrb.hawaii.gov/PAR. And as was mentioned, there are three different branches of government. We've got the legislative branch that makes the laws, the executive branch that implements them, and the judiciary that interprets the law. And today we're going to be talking about the legislative branch. And as was also mentioned, there are various levels of legislatures that we're covered by. One of the things that's important to note about the fact that we're talking about the state level today is that people get confused because we're going to be talking today about state representatives and state senators. And confusingly, at the national level, we also have senators and representatives, but they're US senators and US representatives. So I can't tell you how many times people called my office asking to talk to Senator Schatz. And I have to say, no, 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 wrong level, you know, and I can direct them to the right level. But just know that when you're getting other people to help you advocate, that they may or may not be aware of the structure of government. So you want to not make them feel silly or anything, but just help to provide them the information. So the state legislature actually is consisting of two different chambers, the state Senate and the state House of Representatives. The state Senate has 25 senators serving 4-year terms, and the House of Representatives has 51 members serving 2-year terms. What that means is every 2 years when we have an election, the entire House of Representatives is up for election, and roughly half the Senate is up for election. Now this year, or this next year, 2022, is special because of redistricting. So we'll actually have all 25 of those Senate seats up for election. Half of them will be running for 2-year terms, and the other half will be running for 4-year terms. So all 76 positions will be up in the air in 2022. And sometimes people ask, well, what's the difference? Are they, you know, what's the difference between the two chambers? And the thing to note is that they are run independently, so they each have their own set of rules and customs. The Senate districts are roughly twice the size of the House districts. They have some special duties that are distinct, like the Senate has the advise and consent powers over department directors and certain judicial appointments. The House of Representatives has the impeachment power, that kind of thing. But in terms of making laws, they roughly do the same sort of thing. First off, they're serving as your representatives and senators. They are theoretically your voice as they meet in chamber to discuss what laws make sense. Sometimes there's a good correlation there, and sometimes there's not. That's why it's so important that you vote for who you think should fill those roles. So every address in the state is represented by one member of the House and one member of the Senate. And then they serve on different committees that are focused on particular areas of law, say environmental laws, Hawaiian affairs, finance, judiciary, health, human services, all these different areas. Legislation will be introduced, and it will be referred to different committees depending on its subject matter. And senators and representatives serves on these different committees and influence whether or not those bills become laws. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But the thing to know is that who gets to be on which committee, and even more importantly, who gets to be the chair of those committees, chairs have a lot of power in our system, is decided by leadership. And leadership itself is decided on by the members. So the members vote on who should be the members of the House vote on who should be the Speaker of the House, and the members of the Senate vote on who should be the President of the Senate. And then the leadership appoints who should be the chair of each of the different committees and who should be on which committees and which committees the bills need to go through. The important thing about leadership is it can change at any time. So leadership wants to keep its members happy. That's part of the dynamic that happens at the legislature. So the legislature's website has a wonderful, has a lot of wonderful features on it. They've made it really quite good as far as for participants, and it's won some awards in that regard. But capital.hawaii.gov makes it easy to find out who represents you. And this is important to know, even if you already know who represents you, if you're trying to get someone else involved. So here's the website, and up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll find the link for finding your legislator. You'll just type into the box the address. I'm going to pretend that I live at the Capitol, 415 South Baratania Street, and up comes the results. And I just click on the Senate district, and up comes the name and picture and contact information of the senator for this location. And you do the same thing to find out who the representative is. So it makes it nice and easy. The legislature's website has features such as, you can look up bills, you can do keyword searches. Some of the features are really self-explanatory, like these buttons in the center column. The legislators button, click on it and up comes a list of all the legislators. Click on one of their names and up comes their own page, which has their contact information, as well as a brief bio, which is important to note because if you're going to meet with or talk with one of the legislators, it's worth taking a couple minutes to read their bio. You might find a point of common interest, or, my auntie went to the same school as she did, something like that. So much of advocating at the Capitol is about building relationships. So you want to take a look at that. Likewise, if you click on the committee icon, up comes the list of all the committees. You can click on one of the committees and up comes the chair, the vice chair, members of the committee, and the purview of the committee, the area of law that will be covered by that committee. The most important participants, you can probably guess who this is, people like you. It really works best if people are involved. The legislators, we don't want them to have to do this alone. They need to hear from people whether legislation being proposed is a good idea or not. So I want to emphasize that the people that we're going to be talking about today were elected. And it's very important that you vote and encourage other people to vote. Don't forget, you can run for office or help someone else to do that. But we stay away from the electioneering here in the public access room. We really focus more on helping you communicate with the people who are in office and try to get them to hear your voice. So one of the first things that we would suggest is that you actually reach out and talk or email or somehow get in touch with your representative and your senator. And it's always an appropriate time to do that. Let them know what you think are important issues that should be handled during the legislative session, or if there are things happening in your district that you think that they should be aware of. Sometimes people ask me if it's better to email or call, and it really depends on the member. So I usually just say yes, just whatever way you want to get in touch with them, just do it. And people sometimes ask, well, is it really going to make a difference if I reach out? I'm one person, they've got all these people in their districts, are they really going to hear me? And I can tell you that working in this building, it's really very obvious to me that they do pay attention to the people who reach out. That said, they won't always do what you want them to do, but they do pay attention to the people who raise their voices, especially because you'd be astonished at how few people do. So that said, you want to keep it short and simple. There's a lot of paper running around this building and that kind of thing. You want to try to get to the point and summarize what it is you want the legislator to hear. And you want to be courteous even if the issue has you foaming at the mouth. You want to give the legislator the opportunity to help you. And it's all about building bridges rather than burning them. And that's where Charlene was saying sometimes it's important to know what not to do. So you want to give them the opportunity to help you. And the public access room is here to help you. So feel free, if you're having any hesitation about getting in touch with someone here at the Capitol, to go ahead and reach out to the public access room. And we can talk with you and figure out, is this the right person to talk with? Is what I'm saying making sense? Oh, what other questions might I want to pose? I don't know. But we'll be happy to talk with you helped you to feel more comfortable about what you're going to be saying. And we are one of the best kept secrets in state government. So tell your friends, if people are complaining about state laws, let them know. There's an office at the state capitol, the public access room. Call them, email them. They'll be able to help you get started. So when does all the lawmaking happen? We've got in Hawaii what they call a part-time legislature. They are in session, in regular legislative session, from the third Wednesday in January until late April or early May. They usually go for about 60 session days. And that doesn't count weekends and holidays and days when they say they're in recess, meaning they're not meeting in chamber. The rest of the year is called the interim. That's the time we're in right now. And while they call it a part-time legislature, it doesn't mean the legislators aren't working year-round. All of their offices are open. They sometimes serve in other positions and other jobs, but they are available to meet with you and to talk with you about legislation that, that they will prepare during the interim for the legislative session. So right now would be a time to be talking with them about what bills you might want to have introduced next year. One of the things that we'll be looking for come late December, early January, is the calendar of the deadlines that we're all going to have to abide by in 2022. And the Senate President and House Speaker get together and decide together, okay, this is when we start, which is just established by the Constitution, and then these are all the deadlines that we're going to work with during session. The first thing we do is have an opening day, which in non-COVID times has been quite a fun event. If your app happened to be over on Oahu, it's been voted one of the best free food events, where the legislators open their offices and have kind of a open house. So it's not a day for heavy lobbying, but it's a great day to come and introduce yourself and remind the legislators of the issues that you're going to be focused on during session. During COVID, it's probably going to be less ceremonial and more just getting into work. So another way to use your voice is to share an idea for a new law. So in Hawaii, the only way that bills get started in through the pipeline is to be introduced by a senator or representative. And then that bill has to go jump through a number of hoops before it can actually become a law. So if you have an idea for a new law, you'll want to summarize what the problem is or the opportunity, and then list what you think the law should do. And you may want to just do that with bullet points. Basically, what you'll want to go to the legislator with is an idea of just the summary of what you think the law should do if it's enacted. And then you need to find someone who likes your idea. You really want to try to find someone who will shepherd your idea through the process. So usually we suggest you go to your own representative and senator. Since they're your voice, they may be a good fit. Or maybe the chair of the committee that the bill will probably go to. The sample bill that we use sometimes just as a make-believe in this workshop is someone who is upset over all of the traffic in the islands and decides that they have a solution. And the solution would be require every person in Hawaii to own a bicycle. That would solve the traffic problem. Okay, kind of an absurd idea. There are some problems with it, but fine. If that's their idea, they might go to their own legislator. They might or might not think that's a good idea. If they don't think it's a good idea, we might suggest they go to the chair of the Transportation Committee, see if they could get them to sponsor the bill. If they aren't engaged in that, we might sit down with whoever's got this idea and try to find other legislators who have championed bicycle issues, for example, in the past. So we can help you find someone to introduce the bill. When you find a legislator to introduce the bill, it's not uncommon for them to find a member in the other chamber to introduce the exact same legislation in the other chamber. It's called a companion bill. Or they might ask you to try to find someone in the other chamber to introduce an identical bill. So there's lots of duplication here at the Capitol. So next year, we're going to be starting up on January 19th, 2022. It's the third Wednesday in January. That's the one thing they never argue about. And then if we look at the calendar of deadlines, it's usually only 1 week after the starting date that they say no more bills can be introduced. So in that first week of session, there'll be 2,000 to 3,000 bills introduced. And so if you have a wonderful idea, the time to approach a legislator is really now rather than the first week of session. Because the first week of session, it may be too late for them to turn around and actually draft the bill in a way that makes sense. So one of the rules of thumb we have around here is usually if you can approach the legislator prior to Thanksgiving, that's great, because as we all know, the time between Thanksgiving and the beginning of the year happen really quickly. And you don't need to worry about all the legalese of drafting the bill. The legislator is going to turn to one of the drafting agencies in the Capitol that will actually draft the bill. And when the bill is introduced, it's given a bill number. This one is HB 1243, House Bill 1243. If it was introduced by a senator, it would be SB something. The title of the bill, this one is relating to transportation. The title of the bill is important because it never changes. And in Hawaii, the rule is that the content of the bill must be reflected by its title. So this is different than at the federal level where they can put all sorts of different things into a bill. And then if there's going to be a purpose section, it'll be right up front in the first section of the bill. At the very end, then you'll get into the guts of how to change the law. And at the very end will be a section that says when the law will take effect if it is enacted. And bills can be just 1 page long or they can be 1 inch thick. It really depends on what the bill is going to do and how broad it is. So a lot has to happen for a bill to become a law. It's going to be referred to different committees when it's in the House and different committees when it's in the Senate. And it has to pass through those committees in the order specified. And it's during that committee process that they have hearings. That's why we've got a disembodied ear up on the screen, because they hear from the public whether or not this is a good idea. And that's when you offer testimony. We'll be talking a bit more about that. At the same time that it's going through these committees, it's going to have to pass 3 votes on the floor of both the House and the Senate. They call those votes readings. So the way it works is it gets introduced, it passes its first vote, its first reading, gets referred to committee, leadership decides which committees it has to go through, then it starts to go through the committees, then it'll go back to the floor for a second reading by the full chamber, then go to any final committee, come back to the floor for a 3rd vote in the chamber, and then cross over to the other chamber to go through the same process. So if it's a House bill, it'll cross over to the Senate and then go through the readings and the Senate committees. And then once it survives the Senate, we've got to make sure that both the House and the Senate agree on the exact wording of the bill that will then go off to the governor, who will sign the bill into law, allow it to become law without signature, or if the governor vetoes the bill, there's a mechanism for the House and the Senate to override the veto. So that's a lot that has to happen. And it's all got to happen by the deadlines that are specified in the session calendar that's published in December, early January. And they're called deadlines because they're designed to kill bills. So I said 2,000 to 3,000 bills are going to be introduced. Only about 9 or 10% will actually become law. So it's very hard to get a bill through the system. And we'll see how this works. Say we have our bicycle bill, gets introduced by a House member. The first reading is no big deal. Everything passes the first vote on the floor of the House or the Senate. So the 51 members vote and say, yes, we'll get this bill going. And then if we're advocating for this bill, we'll be looking on the website to see when we get referred to committees. So as soon as we find out on our bill status page, it'll say this bill has been referred to the following committees. And once we find out what those committees are, we want to use our voice. We want to ask for a public hearing. So now, if we want this bill to go forward, it needs to go through those committees. And the only way it gets through the committee is to have a public hearing or a public decision making. And we have to move quickly because there are going to be deadlines that say when the bill has to get into its last committee, for example, or when it needs to get through all of its committees. So that's designed to help keep the legislation moving, but it means that you have to act very quickly. And you want to go to the person who has the power to decide whether or not your bill is going to be heard. And that person is the chair of the committee. The chair has the power to decide which bills will be heard out of all of the bills referred to that committee chair, say the transportation chair. There are going to be bills on our bill regarding mandatory bicycles for Hawaii citizens. There are going to be bills about highways. There are going to be bills about the harbors, all sorts of different things. Out of all the bills referred to the chair, to the committee, the chair decides which of those bills he or she wants to have heard and considered for moving forward. And if your bill does not get scheduled for a hearing, what's going to happen is those deadlines I mentioned are going to come and they're going to go, and your bill will die in committee because your bill won't move on to meet the next deadline. And we looked a few years ago at where bills died, and this large swath of red shows the number of bills, the 40% of the bills died without a hearing. So they were introduced, they passed first reading, they got referred to committees, and that's all that happened to them. Now there's a lot of duplication. As I mentioned, there may be 5 different bills about the same exact thing, and the chair will just pick one of those bills to be heard. But even so, if you don't want your bill to be in that red zone, you want to ask for a public hearing. If your bill does get scheduled for a public hearing, they'll issue a hearing notice. Usually it has to be issued 48 hours in advance of the hearing, at least. And they will have instructions on how you can offer testimony. And you can sign up so that you'll receive hearing notices by email so that you don't miss the chance to testify. And time is always short. I said that they'll give you at least 48 hours notice of a hearing, but then they'll say, we want your written testimony in 24 hours prior to the hearing. So you've really got to act quickly. So testimony is your formal communication to the committee regarding the bill that's being considered. You only get to offer formal testimony when the bill is scheduled for a hearing. So this is different than writing an email to all the members of the committee or sending in, calling or emailing members about your position on a bill. This is formal communication that's going to become part of the public record. And there'll be instructions on how to offer the testimony at the end of the hearing notice. And you can provide written or oral testimony. And there's no rule as to what it's going to look like. You can do it as a formal letter, you can do it as a memo, you can do it as bullet points. The most important things to remember are to make sure you've got the bill number on there, your name. They don't accept anonymous testimony. Whether you're for or against the bill, you want that to be right up front, for or against it, so that they know, just glancing at your testimony, what your position is. And then why? Where are you coming from? Are you an expert? If so, that's great, but you don't need to be an expert. Maybe you know your uncle had an issue that pertains to whatever's being discussed. You can tell the story. Stories are great. They really engage the legislators and help them understand the impact the legislation will have on people. You want to use your own words rather than just cutting and pasting. Cutting and pasting does work, but if they get a lot of identical testimony, that's sort of treated more like a petition rather than as separate pieces of testimony. And you want to keep it short. If you can do your testimony in 1 page, maybe 2, that's ideal. And what you'll do is you'll type up your testimony on your computer and save it, and then come to the legislature's website and use the submit testimony button. And there's also a way that you can request to testify orally by using the remote, the Zoom testimony. So we'll see how this works. We've got 3 different buttons that are the interactive features on our website. Submit testimony, hearing notification, that's how you'll sign up for hearing notices, and then measure tracking, which is how you keep track of all the bills you're interested in. To use them, you have to first register with the website just by putting in your email address and creating a password. And then you'll just sign in. You'll come to capital.hawaii.gov, click on sign in. The interactive buttons turn orange. You'll click on testimony. You'll put in the bill number, and then a form comes up. And the top of the form asks you for your position, whether you support or oppose it, whether you're testifying as an individual or on behalf of an organization. And then whether you're testifying just with your written testimony, that's all I want to do, or whether you also want the opportunity to address the committee in person or on Zoom. And then you'll just upload your file that you've saved your testimony in and submit the form. If instead of uploading the file, say that's just one step too many and you just don't have time, as I said, time is always short, you can forget about typing your testimony in advance and instead just come to this form, and instead of uploading a file, you can just type in your testimony under the testimony comments box. That works too, one way or the other. And then you'll want to click on submit. Once you do that, you'll get your testimony page will show a green box showing that your testimony has been successfully submitted. If you requested the Zoom, it'll say Zoom requested. And then what happens is on the day of the hearing, you'll come back to the website, sign in, click on testimony. It will bring you to this testimony page, and that Zoom requested will have changed to a join button. And you'll just click on the join button and you can offer your testimony once you're called on. They certainly encourage you to use your video when you're testifying in person. We've got all kinds of different rules, but the main thing is to wait until the chair calls on you. You'll unmute your microphone and address the committee. And you'll say, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, I'm here in support of HB 2342. You want to be courteous, respectful, and professional, even if it's driving you crazy, that you may know more than the legislators sitting on the committee about this particular issue. Your job is to teach them and persuade them to your way of thinking. Remember to breathe, even if you're nervous. It's just talk to them like people and let them know your perspective. You want to tell the truth and not exaggerate. You want to become a trusted resource, and just let them know where you're coming from. One of the things I mentioned, you don't have to be an expert. People come, providing their personal stories. They come just offering their own personal moral or religious beliefs. Just let them know where you're coming from and how you'd like them to act on the legislation. So get other people to participate. Let them know how easy it is to offer their testimony. You may want to look at other organizations that, Zonta is an organization that deals with women's issues. There may be other organizations that you may want to reach out to see if they would also advocate on certain bills. And don't forget to listen to the people who are disagreeing with you. Even if it sets your teeth on edge, it helps you to hone your position and to help tell the legislators how to respond to those who disagree with you. So after they've heard all the testimony, the committee can do a few different things. They could vote to pass the bill exactly as it is, without any changes. They could vote to pass the bill with changes, amended. Or they could say, after hearing all the testimony, we're not going to vote. We're going to hold the bill or defer it. And if they do that, there's a little Grim Reaper signal sign there, because that means that then your bill is going to stay in the committee. It's going to miss the deadlines and it will die in committee. So the important thing about these three different pathways I've mentioned is that the person who has the power to decide which of these paths to go down is once again the chair of the committee. Chair has a lot of power in our system. The other thing you'll note is I didn't put an option of vote to not pass the bill, right? That's because it so rarely happens that a vote is taken that doesn't pass the bill forward. If the chair doesn't think the bill is going to pass, the chair will instead just defer or hold the bill. They're very polite about the way they kill things here at the legislature. So if changes have happened, they could be quite minor, just technical changes, that kind of thing, or they could be quite significant. What's going to contain how much a bill can change is that bill title, because everything has to conform to the bill title. Two changes that can happen that could freak you out the first time you see them are they could do something crazy, like say at the effective date could be changed to something like, this law shall take effect on July 1, 2099. What? I thought they were in favor of this. What are they doing changing it to 2099? They have no intention of it going off to the governor like that. It's a mechanism that the chair uses to make sure that he or she will have another chance to discuss the bill and to negotiate on the bill during the conference process at the end of session. The other thing that they may do is blank out any dollar amount. And any dollar amount that they want to keep associated with the bill will be mentioned in the committee report. Every time they move a bill forward, they accompany it with a committee report that summarizes any changes and who testified and whatnot. And if they want to keep a dollar figure associated with the bill, they'll mention that in the committee report. The actual dollar amount will be filled in during the conference process at the end of session, once the Finance and Ways and Means committees determine how much money is actually available. So I know that's a lot of information, but I'm going to give you a little bit more, which is that as soon as a bill gets changed, it gets a new draft number. So SB 1 started its life simply as Senate Bill 1. It got changed by the Senate. It became Senate Bill 1, Senate Draft 1, got changed again by the Senate, became Senate Draft 2, crossed over to the House, got changed once, became HD 1. Now it's changed again, became HD 2. It can look really confusing, but the main thing to know is that it just makes sure that we're all talking about the same version of the bill. And when you're looking at a bill status page, the description of the bill is going to change along with the draft number. So this is what a bill status page looks like. If I put in SB 2013 on that home page, this is what would come up. It shows us everything that ever happens to the bill down here under the status text. It was introduced, passed first reading, got referred, etc. The current version of the bill is always going to be up at the top of the screen. And you can always find past versions over on the right-hand side, as well as committee reports and any written testimony that was submitted. At the top of the status page, you'll find the bill title, as well as the description. And you can always find who the introducers are. First name is going to be the author of the bill, and then alphabetically will be others who signed on as primary introducers and as sponsors. So a lot of information on the bill status page. So after the bill goes through its committee, its first committee, bills can be referred to one committee, two committees, three committees. After it's gone through the first committee or two, it'll come back to the floor for the second vote, the second reading. We have our House bill, so it's the 51 members voting again. Okay, they may have changed the bill. Do we still support this legislation? Yes, we support it. On it can go to the next committee. And then we'll have our chance to ask again to please hear our bill. And if they do hear the bill in the next committee, we'll offer our testimony and repeat as necessary. Once it gets through all of the committees that it has to go through in the House, then it'll come to the floor for its third reading, which may potentially be the last time the House gets to talk about this bill. So they take this very seriously. And sometimes there'll be debate on the floor and that kind of thing. There'll be a deadline by which the bill has to get out of all of its committees and be scheduled for third reading. There'll be a deadline for the bill to pass third reading. That's called the first crossover deadline. And that's the deadline for it to pass third reading and then cross over to the other chamber. And then it has to go through the same process in the other chamber. So, and then once it gets through the other chamber, it's got to get through the other chamber by a series of deadlines to get through their committees that it'll be referred to and to get through the third reading. And then we've got to make sure that the House and the Senate agree on the exact wording of the bill. And that's when we come to the conference committee, where the leadership in the House appoints members to be on a conference committee regarding this particular bill. The leadership of the Senate appoints members to be on a conference committee to talk about this particular bill. And they sit down together in public meetings. There's no public testimony, but you can watch to see what the final version of the bill should be. And this is when, if there's any money attached, they'll be talking with the Finance and Ways and Means committees to see what money is available for the bill. It's where they'll be looking at the bill in terms of not just this particular bill, but all the other bills that have made it through the House and Senate and are trying to be negotiated as to what their final version is going to be. So this is when things can happen to your bill that have nothing to do with the bill, because this is where there may be some negotiation as to which of the bills should emerge from the legislature this particular session. So At this point in advocacy, you really want to reach out to not just the people on the conference committee of your bill, but also your own legislators and anybody else that you've developed a relationship with at the legislature. And then it's not just up to the conference committee. If they come up with a final version of the bill, we've got to make sure that every member of the House and every member of the Senate has had the opportunity to vote on the final version of the bill that will then go off to the governor. So it'll come back to the floor for a final reading vote. And it has to go through that final reading by the end of session, which we call adjournment sine die. It usually happens at the end of April, early May. But you're not quite done yet. Even if you've gotten it through the House, through the Senate, gotten an agreement as to what the final version of the bill is and had that pass final reading, it still has to go to the governor. And the governor then has a series of deadlines that spread usually until July, by which he has to either sign the bill into law, allow it to become law without signature, or if the governor vetoes the bill, there's a mechanism for the House and the Senate to come back into session and to override the governor's veto with a 2/3 vote of each of its members. So you can let the governor know your views. Usually on the governor's website will be a place for you to offer views on legislation. And if you made it through all of that and survived, you'd be just ecstatic. It's hard to get it through in one session. It takes a lot to get your issue into the discussion of the legislature, to have it heard, and then to have it pass through. So we do a lot of counseling here in the public access room to provide some perspective. If you got a hearing on your issue, that is a tremendous step forward. And to remind you not to give up, to get ready for the next year's session, to use the interim, the time between legislative sessions, to meet with legislators. They've got a lot more time. You can talk with allies, talk about what went right, what went wrong. And before you know it, it's going to be the third Wednesday in January again. And the whole process starts up again. And I didn't want to confuse you at the beginning, but it's actually a 2-year cycle. It's called a Biennial Legislature here in Hawaii. So what happens is it operates between the election cycles. So we had elections in 2020. New members were named. And so at the beginning of 2021, they introduced legislation starting with SB1, SB2, SB3, HB1, 2, 3, and away we went all session long. And during session, deadlines came and went, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, your bill died, your bill died, your bill died. And at the end of the 2021 session, all of those dead bills actually are in a little pipeline where they get carried over to the 2022 session. So in the start of 2022, on January 19th, they'll start introducing new bills with higher numbers that follow up on the 2021 legislation. But in addition, they could revive any of those dead bills from 2021 right where they were at the end of the 2021 session. We call them potential zombie bills because they can come back to life from the dead. Now, most of them don't come back to life, but just know that they can. And then at the end of 2022, all of the bills that didn't make it out of the legislative session are really and truly dead because we're going to have new elections in 2022, and they'll start in 2023 with a brand new legislative session. And you don't need to remember all of that about how a bill becomes a law and everything else, because you've got this office called the Public Access Room that's available to help you. And we've got lots of information on our website, lrb.hawaii.org/PAR. We've got lots of handouts under current legislature that will provide you everything from lists of legislators and what committees they serve on, to the session calendar and what deadlines apply to my bill and that kind of thing. We also publish a newsletter. That you can sign up to receive. And don't forget, you can always call or email us, and we will be happy to help you save time and get you to your answers. A few things, I just want to mention a few tools that are available on the website. And this will just take a couple minutes, but I want you to know about this wonderful button called Reports and Lists. It's on the main page of capital.hawaii.gov. And it's where you go to find out what's still alive. It's where you go to find a list of all of the Senate bills, all of the House bills. It's where you can find out what your own senator or representative has introduced. It's also a great way to find bills. So it's the last button in the second row of the icons on the home page. And it opens in the deadline tracking mode, where you can find all of the House bills, all the Senate bills, or bills that have survived major deadlines, which can be really helpful as things move along. And you click on any of the reports and up comes this wonderful list where you can link into the bill status page. You've got their little descriptions. You've got the introducers, the current status. You can click for the most recent version of the bill. Really helpful. And you can find what's in a particular committee. You can use the subject search on the bottom left-hand side. That's a great way to find bills. And I mentioned before that you can sign up for hearing notices. And I want to just show you how easy that is to do. You just sign into the website, click on the hearing notification button, and then you just type in one after the other every bill that, if it comes up for a hearing, you want to be sent an email. And in addition, say you're interested in education issues, you can sign up to receive all of the hearing notices from the education committees on the House and Senate side. And that way you can make sure you don't miss anything that you want to offer an opinion on. And then also the third interactive feature is measure tracking, where you can create a list, put things on it, and generate a report. And I won't go into it in detail, but basically you just sign in, click on measure tracking, you'll put in a name of a list, you just create a list, and then you can create as many lists as you want. You click on show list, it says, oh, well, it's empty. You put in bill numbers, you can put in little notes that will appear on your measure tracking report, and then you generate a report. And then from here on out, you would just sign in, click on measure tracking, show list, generate report, and up comes your report with a column for your notes. And the nice thing about this is if you're following, say, 25 different bills and want to know, well, what's changed since yesterday? You can click on the current status header of the report, and it will resort your report so that whatever's had the most recent activity will come to the top of the page. And then you can review and say, okay, well, this one has been reported out of committee. I want to take a look at that. This one's scheduled for a hearing. This one I'm already up to date with. And then you can resort it again by measure number, and it'll go back into alphanumeric. You can print it out landscape style or save it as a PDF, email it to your friends and colleagues. They'll think you've worked for hours on this thing. It looks really nice. So, and the public access room is happy to help you out. The last thing I want to mention is that the Hawaii Revised Statutes, the books of codified law, are on the legislature's website. So it's over here on the left-hand side. So if somebody, so this is where you can find the existing laws, and you can use the links below the search box for all kinds of things. You can search for a word or phrase in the law books. You could use the links to look at the table of contents or the index. If someone told you you want to look at 291C-146, you can type that into the search box, but better yet is to use the Browse the HRS sections link. And what comes up are the different volumes of the law books. And you want to look at 291C, so that falls in volume 5, 291C. This is not pretty, but it gets you to where you want to go. And lo and behold, you find out that what they're trying to tell you that is that in Hawaii, when you're on a bicycle, you must have at least one hand on the handlebars at all times. Who knew? This shows us how many different things the legislature is involved with, that they need people to offer their opinions on whether these make sense or not. So anyway, no known cure for the political virus. You're here watching this, so treatment is available by participating in your democracy, and you're always welcome in the public access room. Finally, we live in the real world, so this is another way that people might depict the process of how a bill becomes a law. As introduced, a double-decker tree swing, that's what I want. As it gets amended in the committee process, they say, oh, no, 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 it's got to be double wide. As amended on second reading, they decide, oh, it's supposed to go right through the tree trunk. That's not going to work. Luckily, before it's enacted, they've changed it again. They've put up braces. They've dissected the tree trunk. Someone's going to hit their head, but oh well. As funded by the by the Ways and Means and Finance Committees, it didn't even get funded. So the state agency says, well, all we can afford is this useless thing lying on the ground. As reported by the media, they've gotten it completely upside down. As understood by the public, they don't even know we're talking about tree swings, and what was actually needed was a tire swing. So this is to remind you of a couple of things. One, to try to keep your sense of humor, even when you're dealing with something as important as the laws of the state of Hawaii, and also to not be too wed to your initial vision. So much of what happens here is about compromise and listening to other people's perspectives. So if you were too wed to your initial vision, you might be blind to a much better solution. So that is the Your Voice presentation, and I so appreciate you sticking with me through it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And if nothing else, just know that you've got this office called the Public Access Room. We're here to help you participate. And you can call us anytime, email us anytime, visit our website, and yeah, we're here for you, and we love our jobs. So we love it when you reach out with questions.
Good.
And
There are a couple, there are a couple questions. One was, why is it that the representatives have only 2 years? It doesn't seem very long to get anything done.
Okay, well, that's in our Constitution. So if you want to change that, that's something that you could propose a change to the Constitution, and you can do that by introducing a bill. And if the legislature passed the bill, it would not go off to the governor. Constitutional amendments are a little bit different, and then it would go onto the ballot for the people to vote on whether or not that would be a good idea. Or they could, you can have a constitutional convention where amendments are proposed to the Constitution. But that's what it will take. Yeah.
Thank you. And so I know that this is Zonta Club Appeal. You had a question, Julie?
Yes, hi, this is Julie Engelhardt. Thank you so much. It was really informative. I appreciate the presentation and all the information you put forth. I had a question regarding committees. I wanted to better understand why does a bill go through different committees, and how are those committees selected based upon the bill?
Okay, so the bill gets directed to different committees based on the subject matter in the bill itself. So, say a bill on mandatory bicycles would go to probably transportation, maybe public safety, maybe finance. A lot of bills go to finance, a lot of bills goes to Ways and Means if they have any kind of money implication at all. a bill on, say, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a bill. There was one
That makes
about
sense.
child marriage.
Is it the chair that actually determines what
Oh, I'm
committee
sorry.
it approaches next, or how does
No,
it move through those?
it's determined by the leadership. So the Senate president or the House speaker, and usually they will work with either a small group that they have designated to help them decide which committees each of the bills has to go through. Or in the Senate, for example, I believe they use the Senate Majority Staff Office to help with recommendations as to which committees the bill should go through. It can be political in that they can make the path easier or harder, depending on how they do the referrals. They can have committees meeting together as opposed to one after the other. That might make it easier to pass the deadlines, for example. But it is up to leadership. And the members do have, in both chambers, they do have ways to petition for change in the way the bill has been referred.
That's very helpful. Tonya, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. This was so incredibly helpful. And many times I've been to the Capitol, I had no idea public access room was available. So
No,
it's
we're the best
fantastic to
kept
know.
secret. We're the best kept secret.
You are. We usually bother Senator Inouye. She's always gracious to let us use her office. So great to know. And so in that vein, where do you fall in government structure? What's the jurisdiction of the public access room? And where does the funding come from? And how do we ensure that we always have it? If we're one of only 2 states with this great resource, we want to keep it.
Right, right. So we are part of the Legislative Reference Bureau, which is one of the legislative service agencies that serves both the House and the Senate. And we're actually in the Hawaii Revised Statutes. So the legislature designated that there will be an office called the Public Access Room. We're under the Legislative Reference Bureau. That's where our budget comes from. And so far, so good. I think most of the legislators do appreciate the service that we can be. I think everyone is well served by constituents who are able to more effectively add their voice rather than just being angry and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, you're angry. Let's channel that. Let's get you to where you need to focus that energy. And
absolutely. If they don't, on their own web pages, have you guys listed as a resource on their fact page or wherever, they should.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have another question because I see a lot of young faces here and I would like to encourage all of them to have good experiences. So I'm just wondering if we can do practices with them so that they would be encouraged because it's tedious otherwise. And so I'm wondering, is there a way that young people can actually practice writing testimony and getting some feedback on how it reads, or how can they be better at conveying their message in, like you say, a real short message, but very impactful?
Right, right. Well, that's something that we could certainly, set up a special workshop that would focus on that. We can do, mock situations, that kind of thing. I know that you've been in discussion with certain legislators about possibly doing a workshop more focused on offering testimony and that kind of thing. So, and certainly the legislators are the ones that it's really great when you can talk with them about what works for you, what do you hear, what really makes you perk up when you're listening to testimony, and
Yes.
Or what are you looking for in reading through the testimony, because they're the ones that you're trying to reach. I sometimes look at the written testimony that's put forward for a bill, and I like to glance through it to see what how it strikes me. And sometimes I can it's kind of like looking through resumes or something. You know, some of them are going to jump out at you and you can see very clearly, oh, this is for this legislation and these are their arguments. And you can see it just almost at a glance. And then others, you feel like you really have to dig in there and go through all the weeds to try to figure out what they're saying. And there's certainly an art to it.
Thank you. So for those of you who are online, what we plan to do is ask all the legislators from our island to join us to give a couple points, pluses. How would you write it so that it's very convincing to them anyway? And then a couple of what don't do, you know,
Right.
don't make it too long, don't badger us, don't use foul language or whatever their quirks are. So
Right.
we'll take you up on that offer. And I hope that all of you that are here will participate. And there was a question, which is a good one. Claudia asked, what bills are the Zonta Club promoting? So Tonya has one right now that she could probably give you 1 minute. It's called, Tonya, are you willing to share with everybody?
You know, I'm not sure where it stands, but Zonta's initiative right now is to end child marriage. And I do know that we have a bill that is still alive. And I haven't researched where we're going next with it, but that is certainly something that we are in the process of researching. And we did initiate, I think, 2 bills. One died, one is still alive. And but we have had laws passed. We've 2 sessions ago we got more verbiage on strangulation, the strangulation law, what that looks like. And we're always part of our mission in advocating for women is to look at legislation. And so we're happy to partner with other organizations as well. It doesn't have to initiate from Zonta, but we would love to chat with other folks about their ideas and bills that we can help support for them as well.
Okay, so that law that she was mentioning passed, I think, in 2019. And what the law was is that it took many years to pass a law that basically it was strangulation. And the term was strangulation is stopping the air going up into your brain, basically. And it's a very dangerous situation. You can pass out quickly and die. So the definition of strangulation, though, did not include if you sat on your chest and put a pillow over your face, which actually, if interferes with your breathing anyway, it can have the same effect. So they changed the law so that it was included that situation. So it takes a while. Sometimes a good law passes or a good idea passes. So all of you have good ideas. A good idea passes and then has to be improved because of the judiciary saying, it wasn't clear enough or needed a little more definition. But one of the things I will share with you, Claudia, is something that maybe this group could take on to think about. Not this session, the session before. The session before, because of congested court situation, they claimed that they needed to reduce the penalty for abuse cases, which was what allowed for 6 months in jail and more 2 years of probation. They wanted it shorter. So they did they're doing a pilot project to reduce the penalty for abuse of household member so that one, as a practical matter, they want to just push the cases along. So I'm just curious if you know, Virginia, if people pay attention to things that are pilot. Does anybody pay attention to pilots and keep statistics to see, is it really doing what they say that they thought it would do?
Yeah, I think they do. And in fact, it's going to vary depending on, I can't promise you, but absolutely that's what pilots are for, is to give them more information so that they can use that information to prepare legislation that would cover a wider scope. Yeah.
So anyway, this is an exciting area because as they say, we've come a long way, but we've got further to go.
Yep.
And we look forward to everybody on this call. We appreciate your time, all of you. I hope you found it helpful to you and that we will continue to be advocates and have all our voices heard. And more importantly, let's bring our voices together. because together our voices will be heard and we'll have more impact. So I'm going to, I hope all of you, we have a website. We ask you to join us for maybe our meetings, and then we can talk about a project. I'm really curious now to do tracking. I didn't realize was I get those long, detailed what's happening to a bill. I thought, wow, they must spend hours doing that. So now we can do it ourselves. So that's really great. So thank you for giving that opportunity to us. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate we appreciate your time. Thank you, Virginia, for your time. And all the materials are great. And we will have this recorded and available to everybody. So thank you.
Thanks, Charlene.
And,
Thanks, Virginia.
Thanks
Yeah.
so much. Aloha.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.